Look around. You promised Britain would be better. Is it better? No. There is an option for solving the problem that we have, the broken NHS, transport, housing, that doesn't require us to make an enemy. It's just taxing people who won't even feel it. I honestly believe for as long as they can peddle and keep this flag debate alive, it takes the pressure of real politicians to make proper change. Start the Banter Express, people. We're ready.
You want to have that as the title?
Yeah.
Tell me about the Black Boys Theatre Club.
Yes, indeed.
What it is and why you're doing it.
OK, so Black Boys Theatre Club started because I love theatre. And I discovered I loved theatre when I went to go watch The Lion King when I was 16. So it was my 16th birthday, parents brought me to Norwich, and I went to watch the musical, which is unreal. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
OK, cool.
And it is
unreal. I know you were singing all the words.
Yeah.
And, you know, I grew up in Zimbabwe, so I knew most of the spoilers. However, it was so magical, and I was mesmerised. And I sort of vowed to myself, as soon as I can afford it, I'm going to go back to the theatre. So when I moved to London as a young adult, I did go back to the theatre, and this time, without being sort of flanked by my family and friends, it felt like quite an alien experience. You know, I felt a little bit like an astronaut wandering on an alien planet. And, you know, no one there looked like me. I could tell there was a lot of money in the room, a lot of expensive perfumes. And I arrived on time and early, and I was trying to get to my seat. And I remember I was just getting this sort of cacophony of tuts and stares. And then I sort of really reassessed this sort of spark I'd had for theatre, where I thought, well, maybe I'm not meant to be here. I actually remember checking my tickets to see if there were any sort of parameters on what audience was allowed. So I guess Black Boys Theatre Club comes from a combination of those two things. Knowing that there's a magic in theatre, but not necessarily feeling like I was allowed to enjoy it. And so what we've done for the last year is we've run trips to take young black boys to their first play. We've seen everything from Oscar Wilde to musicals to Dear England. And hopefully just to ignite a little spark to let them know that they're allowed to be there, they feel empowered to be part of theatre, and they feel inspired to join the creative arts in general.
And then what was the reaction of the audiences like, seeing like a big group of young black boys coming into the theatre?
Of course. Well, here's one thing I will say. People maybe expect we go and watch these plays and then the boys sort of burst out the auditorium like a sort of bunch of Billy Elliots prancing about, breaking into song. It's not like that, OK? Sometimes, you know, the boys come out of the shows and their world's been rocked. You know, they'll go into school the next day. We've had teachers telling us stories where some of the quietest students have demanded to stand in front of the class and to relay the experience. I've had boys come up to me and go, "Sir, I just dropped GCSE drama, but I want to pick it back up because of this play." Some of them fall asleep, right? That's just the truth.
We've all fallen asleep.
Well, hey, speak for yourself. I was in tears when Mufasa went. Sorry, spoiler. But I suppose what I'm saying is the experience, if anything, is just sort of a banquet for the senses. It's just laying out in front of them a variety of things that they could be, that they could pick from. Lighting, sound design, being on stage.
And why boys specifically?
It's a brilliant question. And you could even ask, you know, why young black boys in particular? Theatre is for everyone, and we know that theatre is already broadly quite inaccessible. It's very expensive. But in addition to the economic barrier that most of these boys face, the price of tickets, the price of travel, you've also got like a cultural barrier, where within the black community, amongst some, things like the arts are wrongly coded as being soft or effeminate, which, you know, aren't negative traits anyway. But a lot of the time, it puts boys off from wanting to go and watch shows like this. There's a running joke that, you know, in African Caribbean families, if you tell your parents that you want to pursue something in the arts, you might as well tell them that you're Pablo Escobar's right-hand man.
Clearly, you're doing this against the background of a lot of public discourse about
Sure.
black representation, whether that's from adverts and the media to Robert Jenrick walking the streets of Birmingham and counting how many non-white faces or how many white faces he's seen.
A fun game for the whole family, surely.
What have you made of that? The word race and racism is in the news, it's in politicians' mouths in a way that maybe it hasn't been. What for you? What do you think is going on?
Big question, but you know, let's answer it at multiple levels. So, with regards to the Black Boys Theatre Club, I know there's a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion schemes. In some countries, they've been abolished, and it peddles this idea that, you know, these have historically been handouts to minorities for them to get shortcuts into industries that they're no good at, which I would contest. If we were to step out to the West End now together, which I'd be up for doing if you are.
I'm always up for a show.
Great. Okay, I've got a musical you love, Kinky Boots. We've got David Harewood leading Othello. We've got Ncuti Gatwa, Doctor Who, currently playing a young Marlowe. We've got Papa Seydu taking his spot. What I'm saying is that young black men are shining on stage. People are paying good money to go and watch them because they're good. And so if black men have an aptitude for theatre and for entertainment, all something like this really does is just shifts the spotlight onto a demographic that will already do very well if you give them the chance to. It's the same as if I said, oh, we're no longer sending talent scouts to areas where there's a high black population. There would be outrage because we know how fantastic, how great athletes young black men are. So I guess what I'm saying is there's so much potential in the black community to be the future stars of stage. It makes sense to shift a spotlight that isn't already on them. As regards for the generic stuff, look, I think it's time that we acknowledge, the world has changed. There's never going to be an outcome where Britain is only full of sort of white British people. We know that. It is innate within human nature to explore and to discover. That was always going to happen in the world. And we know that because if we backtrack to a time where everyone was in their own country, who left theirs as one of the first? It was the Brits. The world is the way it is now. And I think more of the messaging should be around, can we get on with the people that we are with, right? Notice how Robert Jenrick said, there weren't enough white faces. What about enough friendly people? Is that not more of a priority? What about enough decent people? How many of those people did Robert Jenrick talk to or crack a joke with or try to have a decent conversation with? If we stripped every person of colour off the streets and left only white women, men and children, is Jenrick suggesting that he would never come up against an argument or a conflict, or there wouldn't be people he disagrees with? If in some ways, Britain, it's not within our nature to walk down the street going, hello, will you be my friend? We talk about integration, but to be British is actually to be quite contained. So I suppose my point is, it should never be about how many white or black or brown faces there are. It's how many decent human beings are you around.
What have you made as a young black man hearing politicians using race to make their political points?
It's disappointing because it's a politics built on identifying or creating an enemy, right? If we really assess the situation that we're in, not just here but globally, there's talk or there are reports that we're either heading to or currently locked in to a deficit doom loop, which is this idea of this economic asteroid has hit this country, the war, COVID, Brexit, and all of a sudden governments are scrambling to find money that we don't have to fill an already gaping black hole. Broadly speaking, there are two options. Either we squeeze working people for every penny they've got, or we tax the super rich. With parties like Reform and politicians like Jenrick, they're introducing sort of a remix to that formula, which is the deficit populism doom loop, which is this idea of, let's create an even simpler solution, which is to say, if you get rid of this type of people, the problem will be solved. We know that that's not true. Also, furthermore, why don't we opt for a policy which taxes the super rich, which no political party seems to be willing to do? We're at a point now where billionaires are creating apocalypse bunkers. And I guess my argument in sum is why are we facilitating 1% of people to survive after the world ends instead of the 99% of people to survive on the world whilst it's still here? There is an option for solving the problem that we have, the broken NHS, transport, housing, that doesn't require us to make an enemy. It's just taxing people who won't even feel it. And so resorting to a politics which is, if you get rid of this race, this type of person, life will be good. It's a dangerous cycle because once they go and things don't improve, the only way to maintain popularity is to keep creating enemies. And then before you know it, we're poor and we hate each other.
It's interesting though, because those policies and those parties, particularly Reform UK, are getting purchased online in a way that it seems like no other party is. I mean, you're very online.
Sure.
Is anyone getting it right? Is it the right which has managed to crack the internet? I mean, you've seen Nigel Farage and Reform UK on Twitter and
TikTok.
TikTok especially. TikTok especially. That's, they seem to have cracked it and are gaining purchase with younger voters, it seems.
Yeah, look, I mean, opening TikTok and seeing Nigel Farage will forever be a jump scare, especially when he starts doing the lip syncing trends. But really, it speaks to his ability to capture modern digital platforms, but also it speaks to populist politics. One thing I wish I could sit down with everyone and discuss is, I'm not going to sit here as a young person of colour and say what maybe everyone's expecting me to say, which is to talk about Nigel Farage and racism. We'd have to talk about that. We could, but let's not for this moment. Let's talk about the essence of populism, which is knowing that you can say something that everyone wants to hear, knowing you're far enough away from having to prove it. And it sounds amazing. And then all you have to say is, but it's such a shame, I'll never be able to implement it because I'll never get voted into politics. That's how populism works. It's shouting stuff from the sideline. It's the equivalent of a fan saying, if you got me on that pitch, I'd score the winning goal. It's easy to shout that from the sidelines. But the question is, what would happen if he was on the pitch? Unfortunately, we already have proof of that. He told us that Brexit would turn the UK and Britain into a utopia flowing with milk and honey. Look around. He promised Britain would be better. Is it better? No. Well, that's an example of when populism, when implemented, doesn't actually yield results.
We've seen a lot of politicians in recent weeks trying to define Britishness. Keir Starmer said it was the real face of Britain was painting a fence and cutting the half-time orange. You've got Zach Polanski posting a video reciting a poem about the mix and blend of nationalities. Mm-hmm. What's Britishness to you?
Britishness to me, I think, is just being, a decent human being. I would love to say don't be a knob, but I'm not sure if we're allowed to say that. If you're in a pub eating a steak and ale pie with a pint in your hand and someone starts being a knob, it sort of doesn't matter what creed or colour or race you are. More than likely, people are going to tell you, stop ruining a good time. I guess that's fundamental anthropology. I mean, that's me boiling it down into a single sentence. It goes back to what I said with regards to the generic thing. Ultimately, whoever's in the country, you just want them to abide by a standard of decency. And I would like to believe that most people do that.
And what about flags? We've seen flags popping up. There's been a lot of debate about flags. Nigel Farage says flags. Britain is using flags on lampposts to stick 2 fingers up to the establishment. What do you make of flags?
I mean, dude, we've got bigger fish to fry, OK? But let's talk about it for the sake of debate. I think most people would prefer if we were, dealing with the problems that put more money in their pocket and stop this sort of apocalyptic feel to living in Britain. However, I'm not really bothered by the flag thing. If people put a flag in their garden or on a lamp poster in their window, it doesn't really bother me, OK? What I would say is this. Let's try to just collectively acknowledge that for some people the flag is just a symbol of pride, patriotism, but for some people it might be an attempt to weaponise Britishness to make people feel intimidated or alien. It's the same way that, on the way here, stopped at a corner shop, guy with a motorcycle helmet comes in, he takes off the helmet, right? We know that predominantly a motorcycle helmet serves to protect you on the roads, but there is an instance in which it could be used to conceal your identity so that you can commit a crime. So it's just acknowledging that there's a dual purpose to flags, and if the flag doesn't represent to you racism or xenophobia, it's just national pride, we shouldn't have a problem standing up to people who are using it for those more sinister purposes.
Richard Bacon was on Newsnight and he said that if you're putting a flag up at this point, putting it on a lamppost, people will feel that you're doing that to send a signal you want Britain to be more white. Mm-hmm. Is he right?
Well, I had a read of the comments underneath that video, and the comments that I liked the most were the ones talking about using these kind of identity politics or issues to form a wedge between us, to have us arguing. Oh, is this person dog whistling me? Does that mean this person's racist? Is that person just being patriotic? And all the while, the people who can actually implement a change that would affect most of those people watching, most people in the comments, can sort of sit back and go, I'll just let them do that. That's always been the nature of wedge issues. Blame trans people for this, blame that single refugee man for this, and all it does is takes the heat off. Meanwhile, we've got Reeves saying that there's going to be no wealth tax. Reform's got this Britannia card, which has been described as a billionaire bonanza. That's the stuff that matters. But I honestly believe for as long as they can peddle and keep this flag debate alive, it takes the pressure of real politicians to make proper change.
You've got this big, with enormous following online. You're clearly very politically engaged. You've thought about, you like a wealth tax, you don't like that policy, you do like that one. You seem quite disenchanted of all the main parties.
Sure.
Would you go into politics yourself?
Oh, hell no. Hell no, Matt. The day I step into politics, they will find a time that I stepped on a caterpillar when I was 3 years old, and they'll make it into the worst story that's ever happened. Look, sometimes I play around with the idea, but...
So you've thought about it?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course I've thought about the idea. But then when I look at my life now in terms of like all the people I've been able to meet, all the stories people have told me about going to the ballot box for the first time, maybe it feels like the most difference I can make for the moment is by making political satire and parodying the odd Shaggy song to bring down Matt Hancock. If you know, you know.
Yeah, no, yeah, and it's a great song. But I suppose there comes a point, doesn't there, where instead of standing on the sidelines saying, oh, you don't want to do it like that, don't you have to put step forward?
Maybe, dude. Look, maybe. But the reality is, I understand fundamentally, you know, I'm flawed as a human being. And that's why satire is also a way... Satire is saying, we're all wrong in this respect. What are we going to do about it? Like I said, the impact that I've had is... You know, I failed politics at AS level. I had to drop politics. So I feel, in a way, that I'm finding my way as I go.
Yeah.
But where I am at now in my life is finding a way to make politics more accessible to younger people or to people who are totally disenchanted, just to bring us all into the democratic process. And like I said, if it's not broke, I'm not going to fix it for now. But the question is, are you going to vote for me?
That's a great politician's non-denial.
Yeah, that is. What do they call that?
A non-denial denial.
Well, look, Matt,
yeah.
This is the thing, right? I'm not saying I will, not saying I won't.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. We'll get you back on Newsnight when you launch your campaign.
What should my party be called? Bushy Brows Brigade.
Yeah, why not? It'll turn out somebody's already registered that.
Yeah.
It's really good to see you. Thanks for joining us on Newsnight.
Thanks, man.